and that's famous because it has the list of 12 battles that Arthur fought against the Saxons, and that author is placing Arthur in the 6th century. So we have to work out how reliable that source is, and of course it's quite fantastical in the nature, and it says Arthur kills 960 men in one battle. Obviously that's a little bit fake, but well, I don't know, maybe you could do it, I don't know. But that's the earliest thing we have. There are a couple of references in the Annales Cambriae, which was perhaps written in the 10th century, and that has 2 references to Arthur. One, that he fought the Battle of Baden, which is a historical battle mentioned by Gildas, who was writing in the 6th century, but he doesn't mention Arthur. So here's our problem. The battle's the same, but he says somebody else fought at the battle. And then the Annales Cambriae also have Arthur at Camlan, which is his final battle where he dies. But interestingly, that chronicle says the Battle of Camlan, where Arthur and Modred died. It doesn't say they're fighting each other. The earliest source for that goes back to Geoffrey of Monmouth and the History of the Kings of Britain. So Geoffrey was very clever in weaving together what few disparate sources there were. He wove them all together into this fantastic story, and possibly the most influential medieval book we have. And throughout the 19th century, the Arthurian legend becomes more and more popular. You've got the Romantic painters, you've got Tennyson's poetry, and then the beginning of academic study into the Arthurian legend. And by the time we get into the 20th century, you know, serious academic study on the medieval texts. So what you guys are doing with Merlin, you're reinventing it again for this generation.
So is there any way of taking references from the text and perhaps pinpointing any of these battles?
Perhaps the only one we can pin down would be maybe the City of Legions, which is probably Chester, could maybe be Caerleon. But the one other battle, the Battle of Camlan, interestingly, the only place called Camlan is a place in mid-Wales, which appears back in the 16th century and is still present today. In fact, it's still marked on modern maps, and that would seem to be a good a location as any. We have to remember that the earliest text, the Historia Botonum, was written in Gwynedd. So a site in mid-Wales would be perhaps of interest there. So I think that's the most likely candidate, shall we say.
Okay, so it is our mission to find these places around Wales. To locate the real Arthur and Merlin, where would you recommend on this map to go into?
Okay, let's have a look. So I think the next place you need to go to would be somewhere like Kai Kai at the bottom of Bala Lake, and that's where Arthur was supposedly fostered as a child by Kai's father. And then from there you can come up over the top of the hills to Bulchgraes, where Welsh tradition associates a legend of Arthur fighting Crita Gawr. So Arthur has a fight there with a giant, and then from there you can come down to Dinas Mawddwy, and near there is a Camlan. So that's a very plausible possibility as to where Arthur's last battle could be. And from Camlan you're going to go down to South Wales, all the way down here, back to Caerleon. And this is where the Roman fort is. And there we have the amphitheatre, which in the 18th century became known as Arthur's Round Table, antiquarian sort of imagination. But the name sort of stuck, and we're still using it today quite a lot. So, but Caerleon, there's some impressive Roman remains there. So that's where you'll finish your trip.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No problem, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks.
Have a good trip.
Yeah, cheers.
And tomorrow, our quest continues.
It's day 2 of our Arthurian road tour, and after yesterday we've discovered there is no shortage of places for us to visit. All across Wales there are many locations claiming the kingdom of Arthur, a resting place of Merlin, and the home of Excalibur.
Perhaps most famously connected to my character Merlin is the town of Carmarthen. In 1136, Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote the History of the Kings of Britain, and in his story, a boy called Merlinus was found in a town named Carmarthen, which many believe to be Carmarthen. And according to local legend, he still lies here to this day.
But for the next 2 days, this is where our tour of Arthurian Wales will be taking us. From Mold, we're going to head to Caergae and Llanuwchllyn. From there, it is up to Bulchgraes, and then down to Camlan. Finally, we are going to travel south and finish our journey of Arthurian discovery in Caerleon. Each of these locations has a link to the story, and we hope to learn more about the legend as we travel.
So our first stop today is Llanuwchllyn. In the 14th century, A Welsh adaptation of Malory's work, known as The Welsh Birth of Arthur, describes how Arthur was brought here as a child and fostered until he was 14 years old. Caer Gai is a Roman fort nearby which is associated heavily by some writers with Arthur's childhood.
Yeah, but not much remains of it. It's not even on our map.
Well, the one thing about filming in a studio in Cardiff for 8 months is that you obviously don't get to see much of the countryside, and you kind of don't get the chance to appreciate how impressive it is.
You get the opportunity to kind of come up here, up in North Wales, where I've never been before, and see this. It's absolutely stunning.
Well, if this is the area where Arthur grew up, it's not exactly a bad place to grow up, is it? It's quite nice. I wouldn't complain.
We're here at Clonachlin Railway, waiting to take the train around Ballalake.
We thought we'd take the train to mix it up a bit, because we did such a vast amount of driving yesterday. So we thought we'd mix up our Arthurian Legends tour with a bit of train action.
This might shake our world up a bit.
Shake our world up a bit, yes. Yes, it might.
Sadly, although it would have been wonderfully poetic, Ballalake has no connections to the lady in the lake mentioned in Arthurian romance. But it is quite an apt place for us to collect our thoughts.
Well, it was great getting to speak to Scott, wasn't it? Because especially since he mapped out these areas where we can go and visit now, so we've got a clear journey.
There are a lot of regions that have their versions of the story. They all sort of have originated from somewhere, and it's just that the stories have been told in different ways. And of course, we're sort of touring the Welsh countryside, so he gave us some great places to kind of check out where the myths have been created.
The more you become immersed in the Arthurian setting, the more these stories seem to come alive. This really is where the legend meets fact, where the drama meets reality.
It would be nice to believe that at some point there was a man who the legend is, even if it's sort of remotely based on it, that it was, that started it all off.
So after this, we're going to go there.
That's the battlefield where Arthur fought the giant.
Yeah, and then we go on to Camlin, which is where Arthur's last stand was.
From Clonachlin, we are back on the road again and taking a steep climb up to Balchagrois. When we finally reach the summit, we'll find the setting of a folk tale written in 1597. It's said that this is where Arthur battled one of Wales' most fierce giants.
We've stopped just because of kind of this viewpoint, and I think the sun kind of ceremoniously kind of highlighting it for us at times. It's a very beautiful part of the world where we are.
Typical. Just as I was enjoying the scenery, a word from our producer.
Just to reiterate again, a couple of people have now told us this is quite a dangerous road, so do be careful, gents. Thank you.
Hi, Arthurian legend seekers. We've just been informed that we're travelling up a very dangerous road, which I'm not too sure of the reasons as of yet. One magpie, it's not a good sign. But don't worry, because Bradley's at the wheel, and that means everything's going to be A-OK. Isn't it, Colin?
Oh, now I can see what he's talking about. Yeah, I'd better keep my eyes on the road, I think. Now, if Arthur had to make his way up here on foot, it would have certainly taken his breath away. It has mine, but for very different reasons.